given at the Belmont meeting back in October. And there's some new things that have come out since then. Some are good, some are not so good. And I just want to keep everybody abreast of what I know, which in a lot of cases is too much and sometimes not enough. And so if I say anything about any of the groups today and you have more up-to-date information, stop me so everybody can get the current information. Ta-da! You gonna do it for me? Yes, sir. Okay, go ahead. CESTAB was originally started back in 2011. I made it a LLC for the IRS this past year. It originally came out of the Institute of Textile Technology, where it was a committee of the industry groups there. Go ahead to the next one. We have different kinds of clients. If you want to read through these introductory slides, this will be made available to everybody. Go ahead. What we try and do is assist companies. Now, when people ask, there are a lot of small and medium companies out there that just do not have the staff to deal with sustainability and a lot of environmental matters. I remember years ago, there was a jobber that was supplying textile chemicals here in the U.S. And I'll never forget, I found a problem on a material safety data sheet. And I called him up, and the lady answered, and I could tell she was elderly. And she said, hold on, let you talk to my husband, who was the president of this company. And he got on the phone, and I told him what I needed. He said, well, my brother actually handles all that. He retired about 6 months ago, so I'll have to get back to you. Okay? A lot of staffs are getting that way today, where you've got one or two special people that are dealing with a lot of these problems, and it just won't work in today's environment. We also do research at CESTAB, and I invite everybody to look at this if you're interested in some of the research areas. I'm about 50-50, 50% research, 50% industry assistance. First thing I'm going to do is give you the answer, because Nelson's going to shut me up, so I may not get to it. Okay? The answer when it comes to sustainability standards is pick 1 to 3 standards only. And you're going to do this with the assistance of the people you're selling to. So if you're selling to Walmart, for example, you better ask them which ones you need to be doing. You pick 1 to 3 standards. You try and make them as uniform as possible so you have less work. And that's not easy these days. You change them when needed. You identify all the low-hanging fruit first. There's a lot of discussion going on now in the sustainability world that we're running out of low-hanging fruit, and it's going to start costing people money to do the next steps. You need to know your deficiencies, but don't publicize them. So if somebody calls you up and says, why aren't you doing this? You need to be able to answer the question. You just don't tell them you're not doing it up front. You've got to budget people and money. This costs money. The one example I used to use is for ISO 14001, if that's one of the standards you want to comply with, but you need to budget about $500,000 for the first year just to get through that standard. But the biggest one, and in the biggest letters, is PR, PR, and more PR. You're not doing this for anything other than the PR in most cases. And once you decide on what you're doing, you need to let the heavens know you're doing it and that you're doing a good job so you can get some mileage out of this. And when you show your boss that you're getting that PR, he's going to be more apt to give you a budget to do it with. Now, I started thinking about all the standards that are out there, and I was looking one day at a map of all the college football teams in the United States. Okay, this is it. You notice they're all over the United States. Now, that's a big problem, having all those different schools. So what's actually going on in the current climate? This is what's going on. We're being reduced to about 5 conferences that are going to rule college football. All the others are going to be minor players. And that's what I really would love to see happen in this area. The thing I really like about this map is this unconquered territory up here. Don't laugh. Let's look at just group sustainability standards. Okay, this is not companies, this is not the government, this is just groups, that we can look at. It's starting to look a lot like the NCAA. Okay, out in California, you got SAC and BSR, Textile Exchange, Sustainability Consortium. I just put carpet in Dalton, Georgia. There are multiples of those. You got M&B and green blue. You've got blue sign. Don't mix up the blues. You've got Okie-Tex, which we're going to hear another talk about this afternoon. ATAC, AFA, ETAD in Washington. ASTM RAP, and these two are offshore. And that's just most of them. There are others. And if you started putting the government and the company standards on that, it would look just like that first map with the NCAA. That's going to be a real problem for this industry. You can't do all of it. You do not have the money or the resources. And the other thing that's happening with a lot of them is they're asking for different things. There's a lot of overlap, but then there are unique things that you have to do for each one. Now, you may not be familiar, for example, with the Textile Exchange Standard. It's in draft right now, one of them. And so, when it comes out, we'll have to wait and see. The Sustainability Consortium, which is headquartered at the University of Arkansas, is working on one. You're very likely to be able to pass that because it's pretty superficial on the top. The NCAA rule book is 500 pages. I suspect the textile NCAA book is going to be even bigger by the time it's over. And just think when you start talking about the Federal Trade Commission being added to that, there's probably 500 pages just with what they're doing. And you start looking at California, Washington, and every state has a little piece of this. So when you add it up, it's going to be a Bible that somebody's going to have to wade through. And that's going to be a problem. What's the key for all this? The one thing that's common to all of it is that you have to have information. If you don't have the information, you're up the creek without the paddle and the boat. You've got to have information. And the answer that I'm going to push to you, the first part of this talk is, the answer is the VPEP form. The VPEP form, let me give you the briefest history. What happened in the 1980s when government standards started coming in? People like me started sending people like Nelson a form to fill out to tell me what was really in their product. Because MSDSs, or now SDSs, are totally useless. So people like me started sending in forms to people like Nelson asking them to fill it out. Well, what happened was Nelson started getting, God bless Sue Wagner, told me one time she was getting 100 forms from 100 different companies. And they wanted all of them filled out. Well, that's a problem when you got a small staff. So ETAD, ATMI, ITT, and others got together and said, okay, let's come up with one form to replace the 100 forms. And we were very successful, and there was actually a software program created for it. Notice the date, 1998. It was given out to companies for free. Now, that was a mistake at the very beginning. because it worked very, very well for progressive companies. And there are still companies today that if you don't fill out that form, they will not use your product. And it's got to be filled out right. Here's where that funding was a problem. From 1998 to 2013, zero additional funding. So, and I'm talking about no funding, I'm talking about $50 a year was too much. But what started happening is, and AAFA took it over in 2012 because they were starting to see problems with the age. And here's the problem. The form was badly outdated. There was a lot of stuff that was current regulation that just was not on it, and it had to be updated. The regulations changed, but the biggest problem was Microsoft. Because eventually, the old version of the software would no longer run on the new machine. People were having to keep a Windows 98 machine around just to run the software. But again, you can't fix that without any funding. So the new version was brought back a lot of the original group together, and it was updated, and what you have there are 3 pages of the update. I apologize, pages are actually out of order. That's okay. There's new version, has a lot of international stuff on it. It has conflict minerals we were talking about outside. And AFA realized it's got to be internet-based. With all the work going on in China and everywhere else. And we overcame some problems that we couldn't with the original version. The way it's supposed to work now is that a supplier will fill out the form, they will upload it to a website that is run by AAFA, and then if you're a customer, then you will go to that website and download the form. Now, it's going to work different for different companies. If you're Haynes, for example, a company that sells dye stuff will probably just open the entire website to you. If you're Henry, running one dye machine, they only may allow me to look at the products I actually buy. So there's a lot of security, there's a lot of ways to do it differently than we were able to do before. The beta version actually has been launched, and I call it beta because I haven't gone through it completely yet. March 28, 2014. The paper version, and it's 7 pages now, and it'll probably be 8 or 9 before long. It's still available for free. But the mistake we made before is not going to be made this time. $200 to $500 per year per license. The $200 end is for end users, like a dining finishing mill, and that's not one company, that's one user. And the $500 end is for the people that are filling out the form to upload to the database. So it's built in that if this is going to work, somebody's going to have to pay for it this time. Because the company that set it up, this beta version, I believe the bid was $25,000. The original one was done for about $10,000. So it's about $25,000 just to set it up. Paper version is still available. If you want to look at this thing in paper form, which is the free form, you can go to WeWare.org, but it's much easier. Just Google AAFA VPEP and it will be the first hit you search. You go directly to it. Now, I want to, if you've never seen this before, I want to talk about it a minute. And, yeah, there you go. Here's the setup of it. There are 9 sections. The last one's just contact information. But you have product supplier information. And that's more than it used to be. It's not who am I buying it from. I want to also know who actually manufactured the product. So if somebody is buying dye stuff in Asia and it goes through 4 different companies before I buy it, somebody's got to know how to go back in the supply chain, because you've got to know the manufacturer. There's a lot of things about emergency funds, and that had become a problem with some of these things coming out of Asia in different places. Lots of things about countries. It used to be everything was US based. Now on the first page you got Canada, El Salvador, Japan, China, Honduras, Korea. And that's probably going to be expanded. If you go to what is page 3 of yours, I think it's the 3rd page, you see product data that is being asked for. Algicides, biocides, defoamers, surface active agents. This is one that for 20 years has been a problem, because people will tell you there are no surface active agents and they're selling you surfactant. Okay, so it's a good way to know if people filling the form out know what they're doing. That one's always been pretty good. Alkyl phenols is a separate listing. Metal compounds, PFOA is listed, and others. And if you look at that, let's see, is it the top page in the handout? Yeah, top page in the handout. This is, notice all that is product based. Does the product have these categories in it? If you look at section 7, we're actually asking for the individual components. And it's basically asking you for everything that you aren't going to jump up and down and say it's proprietary. And if it's proprietary, there better be a good reason, and you better be ready to disclose it. I mean, I've talked to some people that are going to be receiving these in some of the major companies, and they say, if something's listed as proprietary, we'll sign a sheet, but you better tell us what it is. So there's a lot of things coming up, but you've got physical data, toxicological data. This is the one that basically gets left out most. Environmental data. Is it toxic to fish? A lot of companies don't know that. What are the wastewater degradation products of these products? Component regulatory, metals analysis. If you look at the metals analysis page, it's one full page. It's got all the conflict minerals on there, and it's asking you for any level. So it's not just greater than 0.1%. We want parts per million and parts per billion. There's one standard out there that if you don't do parts per billion or up to 100 or anything above 100 parts per billion, it's rejected under that standard. Here's the problem. This is the big one. Are people going to pay for it? And for almost 20 years, or 15 to 20 years, nobody would pay for it. People would say, when are you going to update the software? When are you going to update the form? Are you willing to pay $50 to have it done? No. Well, it's not going to happen. It will be interesting here, and what it's going to take and what is happening is some of the bigger companies and retailers have said, you will use this form or we won't buy from it. That's the only way it's going to work, and we'll see how long they hold out. Is it going to be accepted by all those standard groups that I had on the map a while ago? We're hoping so. Because if every one of those groups starts having their own form, Nelson's hair is going to turn gray.
It's bad enough now.
I mean, we'll be back to where we were before the form was started. Okay? And that's a real problem. That's not going to work at all. The other problem, and I'll do a little advertising here, there are not a lot of experts left. Okay, when we came up with this new version of the form, most of the manufacturers and suppliers involved in it brought people out of retirement to sit on the committee. So there are not a lot of people that even know how to fill out this form. or what all these different things mean. And so a lot of people you're going to get some really crappy answers when you start looking at data. It's just going to be bad. And then, to justify some of their problem is, their raw supplier probably doesn't know what's in their product either. So if you're a dye manufacturer and you're buying raw material from somebody, you say, oh, I need you to fill out this form, they're going to go, what? You know, I don't know what metals are in, you know, these, you know, things. And again, the last one, of course, is the confirmation of the data. The biggest thing that allows confirmation on this form, there are some pitfalls we've added to it, okay, so that you can see, like if they say there's no surface active agent, but it's a surfactant, okay, you got it. And there's several of those on the form that we've left in there. So the average person can know to say, hey, wait a minute, you know. Or if they get all the metals data back and it's all 0 parts per million, you know they're lying. It just doesn't work that way. Let me talk about some of these standards, and I'm not going to go through these for lack of time. I just want to point out the different types. You have your group standards, which I spoke about with the map. You have performance standards. You know, some of these, and some of these are cross categories, but these actually ask you to measure something and report on it. One of the big ones is the GRI water standard, which is used a lot in Europe. And this is how your water usage is reported. Then there are government standards. EU, German azo dyes. For anybody you know at EPA, it is not all azo dyes, it's just certain ones. REACH, California Safe Chemistry, conflict. UN is worrisome. And then you've got all those people who have organic labels. How many of those are there? Okay. Then there are company standards. NBDC, Blue Sign, OTTEX, NSF ANSI, and Green Blue. Now, you may not know Green Blue, but all those problems you're having with plastic and cardboard packaging, these guys can solve that problem if you use their standard. It'll cost you money, but you can fix it. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. And there are going to be a lot of new players, is the worrisome one. AFA, this is the version 14. It's not out yet, but all the comments have gone in for their RSL. It keeps getting longer and longer and longer and longer. And finally, this year, there are some government regulations that include antimony, which we'll see. I'm going to stop after this one and skip a bunch of these, but I want to mention ZDHC. Is anybody working with this group? Okay, I'm talking about it. ZDHC stands for Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals. This was the group formed when Greenpeace went after Adidas and Nike. And the president of Adidas got up and said, we will have zero discharge of the chemicals you're talking about. And nobody slapped him, you know, good and hard at that point. Here's the problem. They've been working 2-3 years now. You know, there's 12 categories of chemicals they're looking at. Here's the problem. They can't define zero. They can't define discharge. And they can't define hazardous chemicals yet. That's a real problem when that's the title of your group. And it's going to be a real problem when they start fudging and saying, well, we really didn't mean zero, you know, things like that. And there's a whole thing here of what they do. And, you know, they got to define these things. Misidentification of of chemicals. Part of this group, Greenpeace, wanted to ban azo dye because they didn't know any better. And then I keep asking this group, I said, well, what about Greenpeace list number 2? And they say, well, wait a minute, what are you talking about? There's only one list. I said, now. As soon as you get Greenpeace list number 1 finished, I can write number 2 for them right now. What you're leaving on. So that's a real problem. Okay, Higgs index, it's a paper typer. People are going to fill out a bunch of paper and say, yeah, we're really good, we do these things. And unless somebody checks behind them, nothing will get done. Just keep skipping. Keep skipping, keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. Okay, go back one. Now, there is some hope on the horizon. This is the draft China standards for 2014 for wastewater. I don't know if these have gone into effect or not, but there are some things here that people do not want to analyze in their wastewater. And if this was my list, it would be about twice that long. Because there are things they've left out, even in this long list. For example, they have suspended solids, but they don't measure dissolved solids, which is the bigger problem. So this may help eventually as people have to do this. There you go, keep going. So I'm going to leave you with the answer. You're going to have to decide which of the many, many standards your company can do. Pick 1 to 3, PR the heck out of it, but you're going to have to budget some money because you're never going to be able to do it correctly if you don't. Just think, not long ago, how many companies would have said all buildings in Bangladesh are safe to work in? Okay? And when they got found out, it was a real problem. Same thing here. People are going to, there are groups in China now, environmental groups, that are measuring wastewater. It's going to be a real problem. So I thank you for your attention. If you